Our first presenter is Tim Fox, and he's the Director of Indigenous Relations for the Calgary Foundation. And I just have to say, the Calgary Foundation, in terms of the Indigenous work that we've been doing with ARPA, a lot of the Choose Well work is Alberta Health funded, but the Calgary Foundation are really stars with us in terms of what we're doing for Indigenous people in Treaty 7, so thanks to Tim. Tim Fox is a proud member of the Blackfoot Confederacy from the Kainai Reserve, located 2 hours south of Calgary. He's the Director of Indigenous Relations with the Calgary Foundation, where he hopes to incorporate the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, both internally and with the broader community. And part of his work is doing that is being here with us today. Then we have Barb. Oh, Barb, I loved your bio. So Barb Longair from the public, he's a Public and Children's Service Manager from the Lethbridge Public Library. And it's funny, so Barb loves libraries and works in one, which is awesome. And she's a Public Services and Children's Service Manager for the Lethbridge Public Library. She's not a jock. However, she is a lifelong learner of physical literacy and play. And that's pretty funny because I'm actually a sci-fi nerd / art-loving jock. So I'm very complicated, so right? We should talk after. That should be my eHarmony profile. Okay, and Lisa Weeks is also with the library. And so she's, Public Service Manager for Chinook Arch Regional Library System, which consists of 33 member libraries across southwest Alberta. And again, physical literacy, lifelong active learning is one of her personal and professional passions. So we're excited to have the ladies. And they're actually going to be a unit. So we have 2 units of 2, which is very exciting today. So there you go. They're a unit. All right, so Simone Mamoon, the Rural South Central Alberta Regional Inclusion Coalition from Chestermere. Simone began his career in international and community development in Bangladesh, working for an NGO and the United Nations. He moved to Canada, and in 2016, he organized a regional inclusion forum. So he'll be discussing that work. And of course, we have Vivo in the house. Right? Okay. So we have Tracy Martin, who's our senior manager with Vivo. As one of the driving forces behind Vivo's mission, innovation, and public image, Tracy has been a major hand in positioning, launching, and growing the organization over the last 14 years into a successful charitable enterprise. Because you don't want to be unsuccessful and have that in your bio. You fail every day. And then we have Jessie Seymour, has been working in the development industry for over 12 years. She has been part of a Brookfield residential for 11 of those years, and she's also the manager of community experience for Vivo. Oh, Brookfield. Thank you, Brookfield. All right, so let's get on to the presentation. So we're going to call up Tim to be our first 15-minute presentation, and I do have timing. Yeah.
Hello. Awesome. I just feel odd standing behind a podium, and I have this height thing too, right? So, okay. Idamix gunutuni nistoni danigun I duisa gasum. I just hello, good morning in my Blackfoot language. I'm originally, like Janet said, from the Blood Reserve, and my family comes from the Agapo clan. That means the Many Children's Clan. I feel like I'm cutting in and out. Is that it? Okay, I'll keep an eye on that. So my family comes from the Agapo Gays clan. In Blackfoot, that means the Many Children's Clan. I like to mention that just in case there are other, people from the Blackfoot Confederacy in the room. They know who my family is, where I come from, and as well for all of you. So, I think I'm going to be sharing a little bit of my story, a little bit of my work at the Calgary Foundation, and try to connect that to some of the collaboration work that we're doing. I thought I would start from the beginning of my journey when I moved to Calgary. I grew up on the Blood Reserve. I grew up with the culture. I grew up with spirituality. I grew up within the traditional family structure from an Indigenous perspective, an Indigenous paradigm of thought and practice. I say that because it's different from a Western paradigm of family, how you view family. So growing up, My parents struggled. They loved us. They loved me. They showed me the emotion of love and how to love. They didn't love each other. And I saw that from a very young age. I witnessed a lot of family violence, substance abuse, all that kind of stuff. Thankfully, because of our Indigenous family structure, I had other parents. I had aunts and uncles and grandparents who I considered parents. Biologically, I'm the oldest. I have a younger brother. I have a younger sister. But from a traditional sense, I have many brothers and I have many sisters because I have lots of cousins. And so that's what I mean when I talk about an Indigenous family concept. And I was connected to the culture. Moving into the city, I moved to the city probably 15 to 20 years ago, and it was a huge cultural shock. Coming from a small reserve, raised in culture, I didn't feel like I belonged when I moved to the city. And I know in the work that I do now that there are a disproportionate amount of Indigenous community people that don't feel like they belong when they move into urban centers. That's a really important thing to consider because we are the fastest growing segment all across Canada. Indigenous people are the fastest growing population in all of Canada. While Canada's fertility rate is on the decline, the Indigenous population is increasingly growing, and that's important for all of you to consider. You have to prepare yourselves for this growth. You have to prepare the services that you provide. You have to prepare the way you do your own practice. You have to, I think all of us have a certain standard of the way we work, how we perform, our policies, our procedures, right? And that's a very Western perspective. That's a very Western paradigm of thought and practice. It's a colonial thought of practice. I think what I'm trying to do at the Calgary Foundation is incorporate a cultural shift, a shift in the way my other colleagues at the foundation and volunteers and board members think and the way they do their practice that raises Indigenous paradigms of thought and practice to the same standard that we hold Western thought and practice. So that's what I'm doing at the Calgary Foundation. I'm trying to incorporate this cultural shift because when I moved to Calgary, like I said, I didn't feel like it belonged. It took me leaning back on kind of my own set of skills. Thankfully, I had lots of positive influences in my life, and I was able to navigate the system of Calgary in general. And I looked up in the phone book, I went to the word Aboriginal, and I looked up organizations that were specific to who I was. And I called up the Urban Society for Aboriginal Youth, and that's how I kind of got my foot in the door of many opportunities and eventually found a connection and a network of people where I did start to begin to feel like I belonged. So, that's kind of a personal touch, my personal journey. In the last 10 years, that network and that connection has grown by way of my own volition. I've sought out organizations, partners, and colleagues who are doing similar work for Indigenous communities and populations, and so Calgary Foundation brought me on board to try to impact and facilitate a change process for the way they do their practice. I have a level of lived experience, like I said, so the work that I'm doing is very heavy work. It's not easy to be an Indigenous, although I think Indigenous people play a unique role in this work because we're walking in two worlds. I have one foot in this cultural world and this perspective and experience, my own lived experience, but I also have a world in this Western world and this Western way of doing things. And so I play a unique role in trying to bridge some connections, bridge some gaps. There's a huge gap that exists when it comes to reconciliation. A lot of Canadians in general don't really understand why there's a need to repair a relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. And I think learning about that is crucial. That's the first step. Preparing yourself with context. This is what I tell all of our stakeholders is you have to enter into a journey of truth telling, and you have to enter into a journey of context setting, because if you don't understand the challenges behind Indigenous populations, why there's this need, why there's this relationship that needs to be repaired, it's just going to be impossible to try to engage with Indigenous communities, try to collaborate, all that kind of stuff. And so a lot of the work that I'm doing is very heavy, but it's contributing to that cultural shift. It's contributing to a reconciliation practice. And it's information that isn't widely known across the country. And so, I have to really hand it to the Calgary Foundation for taking this step, for creating a role that helps to facilitate this process when it comes to trying to mobilize reconciliation. So that's a lot of the work that I'm doing, I think also it's crucial to figure out the context when you hear about things like Colton Boushie and Tina Fontaine and things that are so highly reported on in the media. Those two cases specifically are known kind of the country over. There's this outcry, this outpour, there's this voice that's rising about the injustices that Indigenous people face. And being an Indigenous person, I understand where that comes from. I understand when you're exposed to a system and when you're exposed to injustices throughout your whole life, you're very in tune to things like that when they happen. And so I understand that. So I think in general, it doesn't matter what sector you're in, I don't think this responsibility or this work should fall to one sector. I don't think it belongs to social services, the education sector, human rights, justice. I think it's a basic responsibility that if you're going to, live and work in this country, you need to kind of prepare yourself and really prioritize the work of reconciliation, the work of the collaborating and engaging with Indigenous communities. We're hearing acknowledgement of land at a lot of places. You probably heard it today. But what does that really mean when you acknowledge land? It's very significant. It's a significant step towards reconciliation for the Indigenous people, because we know exactly what Blackfoot Confederacy means, the Métis Nation of Alberta means, treaty means, right? And did you know everyone in this room is a treaty person? And not a lot of people are aware of their treaty rights. And so even acknowledging land, you need to kind of understand the context behind that. It's very significant. I think if you move throughout your career not really understanding the intricacies or the significance behind acknowledgement of land, it just becomes another repetitive thing that you do. It loses its meaning and significance of acknowledging the first people who were here. And again, just when I think of the Indigenous paradigm of thought or practice, we don't think in terms of years. The last 150 years was just a couple of generations, where as we think in terms of generations, we know that the last 150 years was just a couple of generations, and our people have been here for generation upon generation upon generation. And so I do this work. I would be naive to think that I would see substantial, significant change in terms of reconciliation in my lifetime. I do this work for future generations, because Senator Murray Sinclair was the chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and he talks about the challenge of reconciliation being left with young people, and I totally agree with that. So what we're doing, what our generation is challenged right now, is this truth-telling movement, because there's a process of truth-telling. Healing has to occur for Indigenous people as well as non-Indigenous people. That healing has to happen. Justice should be sought out if it could be sought out, and then reconciliation can begin to happen. And I get asked the question all the time, well, what does reconciliation look like? How much is it going to cost? What is the project, right? And that's not an easy thing for me to answer, because I don't think it should have a deadline. I think work of reconciliation should be embedded into practice, everyday practice, when you are working in service delivery. All these kinds of sectors, I don't think it should have a deadline. I think you really have to challenge yourself. Thank you. 5 minutes left. So I think we are seeing some changes internally at the Calgary Foundation. Certainly our support for Indigenous specific projects has increased. The awareness about my role and the work that we're doing. I know you heard from Tracy this morning, who probably talked a lot about work of the model of the foundation. And so I'm hoping to kind of plant some seeds. When we talk about reconciliation, we use the metaphor of planting a tree. So when we think in terms of reconciliation, all across the board, everyone is at different stages of understanding, different stages of work. So we're on uneven ground, right? And I think what is needed are people like me or people like you to really be engaged in this context setting, so that you can impact that change internally at in your own workspaces. You can plant some seeds. I think the solutions behind what reconciliation could look like has to be a collective effort. I don't have the answers to that. I don't know what that looks like. I know what I'm doing is impactful, and it's going to add to some of those solution-focused initiatives, like I said, for future generations. For right now, We are engaging with Treaty 7 communities in a real way, not just from a transaction way. We're reaching out to elders. We're trying to bring elders in to learn from elders about our own practice. Internally, we're incorporating small changes around acknowledging land. We have acknowledgement of land and territory on every single one of our email signatures. So my colleagues in donor relations and grants and communications, all of their stakeholders are seeing that. And then it starts a discussion, because if they have a donor, seeing that, then they would ask Laylee or someone from donor relations, what does that mean? And what are you guys doing? And then Laylee and all of my other colleagues are able to kind of speak to our journey in this context setting place that we're at. In this next year, we are preparing some of our volunteers. So the Calgary Foundation works with a lot of community volunteers that review our grants and our proposals and applications. We didn't feel like they were prepared with the cultural framework to really understand the need behind Indigenous-specific projects and proposals. So I'm taking those volunteers through half-day sessions of context setting. They're again heavy pieces of information, and I've designed different learning experiences. And so one of them I have designed incorporates a Play-Doh activity, where I talk about impacts of intergenerational trauma in theory. I also use my own narrative, my own life story, and I connect it to my own impacts of intergenerational trauma. Janet this morning was talking about Blackfoot Sign Language. Well, I don't know Blackfoot Sign Language because that's an impact of my own intergenerational trauma. That's a thing that was lost along the lines because of a disruption in history, right? So it's just one example. And so this Play-Doh activity, what I do is I try to visualize what impacts of intergenerational trauma look like today for myself, for my daughter who's 7 years old. That's one thing that I've designed. There's another learning opportunity that I have tried to incorporate that talks about understanding the importance of treaty relationships and how treaties were established and how they still are important pieces of information to look at today. All of this stuff, things like the blanket exercise, just by show of hands, who here has heard of the blanket exercise? So the blanket exercise is a result of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples report that wrapped up in 1996. I mentioned that RCAP report because there are many documents that you can begin to familiarize yourself with, RCAP being one of them. Right after RCAP ended in 1996, Kairos developed the blanket exercise in response to the RCAP report. There's the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People is the second document, important document. And then we have the Truth and Reconciliation, 94 calls to action that talk about the underlying principle of all those three documents calls for all Canadians to work together. This issue of engaging Indigenous populations, understanding where they come from, shouldn't belong just to one group of people. It's a shared responsibility. Our history is a shared responsibility. Moving forward, I think collectively, once you embark on this journey yourselves, you'll be more successful at engaging the indigenous population, because we're the fastest growing segment, and we have to prepare ourselves to present services, programs, spaces where Indigenous people feel like they belong, because right now they just don't feel like they belong in a general sense. So thank you. I think that was within I didn't get the stop sign, so. So thank you. I'm around for questions, obviously, and feel free to ask me anything. The other thing when I enter into these spaces, people feel leery of asking questions. They're afraid to offend. I'm not going to be offended. Part of my role is to create really safe spaces to have important dialogue. So I'm open to any kind of question that you have. So think about that as you learn from these other leaders and the important work that they're doing. Think of some questions for us, because that's why we're here. We want to engage in a meaningful dialogue. So thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So yeah, you're going to get highly entertained if you give her the mic. So I wouldn't do that, but that's okay. All right, so again, my name is Lisa, and I'm with Chinook Arch Regional Library System. And our library system extends across southwest Alberta, which is part of traditional Blackfoot Confederacy territory. And we do acknowledge that openly and at our public events, including our regional conference, which we just held. So we are trying to work forwards with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission recommendations and our really happy with our members who are embracing this as well. So with our Chinook Arch system, we extend pretty much from the northeast of Milo Arrowwood area all the way down to the border, the American border, and then all the way west to the provincial border. So we're a pretty good chunk of the province, and we do consist of 33 member libraries, and the largest library is Lethbridge Public Library, which Barb represents. And so with our first slide here, what we're wanting to show to this group and to many others and anyone who will listen is that we are interested in active living. We are wanting to support our communities and really promote physical literacy. And this is the definition that we go forward with. And so this helps us as librarians, because as Barb notes, we are not jocks. But we need to understand what physical literacy means in the realm of all the other literacies we work with as librarians. And one of the needs that we're hearing from our communities and from our member libraries is that we want to help with community engagement, and we want to help create healthy communities and thriving communities. And with Southwest Alberta, as with many parts of Alberta, we range in size from very small villages and hamlets to larger urban centers like Lethbridge. And so we struggle with resources, we struggle with access to programs and services. So what is the role the library can play with supporting our communities? And so we realize as a group that active living creates healthy communities, which creates thriving communities and supports the entire network. And so what we've heard, if we can go into the next slide, is that our libraries want to provide more programming, and they want to provide active programming, barrier-free programming, and community programming that meets the needs of the communities that they are actually in. And so what we've been able to do as a regional library system through our headquarters based out of North Lethbridge is produce a new regional programming collection. And this is for borrowing of and use by library staffers throughout the Chinook Arch Regional Library System, so that they in turn can curate, develop, and deliver successful programming in their communities. So we are providing the stuff, and then they get to deliver the content. So it's allowing that ownership of the programming and the delivery of it directly to their community. So we really are focusing on removing barriers, making it fun and easy, and making it inclusive so that it is intergenerational, and it's for individuals of all abilities, and it's dealing with the realities of the Canadian climate as I look outside at yet another snowbank. So it's not all about playing in the park in the summer. It is about actually doing stuff inside, having fun, getting people together. So fun things from mini golf all the way to juggling scarves to beanbags and rubber chickens, which drives Barb's nuts. But we love rubber chickens. And many of your tables do have the actual brochure that we share with our member libraries. Apologies, I don't have enough for everyone. So I just want to kind of give you that overall framework that we are supporting this at a regional level, and libraries and librarians are good partners, and we are already aware of the Alberta Recreation and Parks Association and groups like Vivo, and you guys are good partners too, so let's start thinking about being more partnery. Is that a good word for the day, partnery? But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it over to Barb, who's going to give you some really good on-the-ground working examples of how a library, and in this instance, Lethbridge Public Library, does physical literacy programming and building its collection of physical literacy items. Barb?
Excellent. Thank you for inviting us. We love meeting new people. This all started because of Lisa, so just blame her. When Lisa and I were hired at the same time at Lethbridge Public Library, our then CEO kind of gave a direction to the staff of the library, and he said, stop looking at your navels, get out in the community, and become outward facing. And we went, what? I have a lovely navel, thank you very much. So we went out into the community. Lisa said, get in the van, and we went out. And one of the greatest groups to work with were the health and wellness community. They embraced us, and we were a little taken aback, but it was okay after a while. The other community was the sports community, which was terrifying. I would leave those meetings with a gut ache because I was like holding in my belly for the entire meeting. Like, yes, I'm healthy, I'm one of you. But they found out otherwise. So the result of all this talking and laughing and meeting and coffee and donuts and cookies and fruit was that we started forging partnerships. And out of these partnerships, we learned that, there was this great community need for free play. We're like, what's free play? And they said, basically, getting out into nature, which is, they have the research behind that, and doing stuff, being active. You don't have to be on a sports team. You can just go out and play. And I'm like, okay, that sounds pretty good. And so Lisa decided, well, hey, what if we brought rubber chickens into the library? Freaking stupid rubber chicken. And yeah.
She really hates them.
Well, they kind of smell. But so really, Lisa's the brains of the operation and I'm the brawn, because I'm the one who has to take the rubber chickens and give them to the cataloging department and say, hey, can you put these in our collection? And they just open the alcohol drawer, take a swig, and blame Lisa. So, we created this physical literacy collection, and we have 80 unique items as with the rubber chickens and everything. And we also have balls and bean bags, and then we had to learn the names of these things too, like pokey sticks. No, they're walking sticks.
Very popular.
And we would have brought the, what are they called? Snowshoes. Sorry. Yeah, we would have brought those, but really they're so popular that they're out all the time. But we do have snowshoes, super, super popular. And because we had the model in the library of the toy library, we said, well, this is really kind of like a toy library, but with a different purpose. So then that kind of calmed all the librarians down and said, well, I suppose we can do that. All right, fine. So through this collection, the first building community was actually going out and saying, hey, what do you guys need? And them telling us. So that was great. So we built the collection. But the second great way that this built community was through this collection. So we've got groups like these guys, and they not only use the collection, but they started creating programs to utilize the collection and partner with other organizations. So up on the screen, the top left, that's our roving gyms. And one of our super duper great partners is the Lethbridge Early Years Coalition. And pretty much every city, community has one. And they are fantastic to partner with. And they decided their research was, in the wintertime, parents were struggling with, what the heck, how do you burn off this energy, because they're driving me nuts, and for free. And so we said, well, we've got this big theater. Why don't we throw a bunch of our physical literacy stuff in there? And then our sports jock person said, you have to have appropriate equipment. And we went, right? They're babies, they're smaller things. But really, we got advice, and so we got this baby gym equipment, and we put it together with the roving gym equipment, and basically, they take all this stuff to various places around the community, in the west side, in the north side, in the south side, and say, go at it. And we do have, what's cool about Lethbridge is we've got the university with a kinesiology department, and their students have to do these projects. So we always get a student, and then they kind of lead this roving gym, and so they talk about physical literacy, and they can demonstrate these things. And hey, you know what? Your kid who's walking on this imaginary tightrope, that's a great foundational skill. And yeah, the other one on the right, Baby Gym Time, this is with the Family Center. So again, same thing, it's a free program. We have these parents, so like everybody's knowing that when you're new to a community and you have new kids, it can be really isolating. So this is another program partnered through the library with our collection that says, hey, come to this free program, put your kid on the floor, and we'll do these fun activities. And it builds community, it uses our collections, we partner with other organizations. It's all fantastic. The last one is one of my favorites. It's called L-Skip. That's Lethbridge Seniors and Kids Intergenerational Play. Yes, for the win. And this is the same kind of program. It's with our seniors community associations, and they usually have gyms. Okay, well, we have connections with the kids in the library, so we'll do this kind of roving gym kind of thing, but you know, the parents will go off with our early years person and they'll learn about how to be a better parent or what challenges you face. The kids go play with their grandma and grandpas, you know, and they have a blast with this equipment, and then they all come back for a snack, and then they read a story together. Oh my gosh. So, you know, these kinds of things, when we just simply said, hey, we're open, what do you need? This is what happened from that. And that's what we have. And please, please, if you want to come visit us or talk to us, we're more than happy to tell you many more things that we do with programming, community building, and different kinds of collections. So thank you for your attention.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Shumon Mamun, and I work with the city of Chestermere. And those who don't know Chestermere, where it is, it's just about 22 kilometers east of city of Calgary. So it's a small lakeside community, about 20,000 population, and one of the fast-growing municipality in Alberta. And as we are located in the rural region and consider ourselves as a small town, and being small and located in the rural region, we have some different challenges in our work, especially when we are talking about diversity and inclusion. So one of my portfolio at the city of Chestermere is diversity and inclusion, and how we can make our community more inclusive and good for everyone. To do that kind of work, I really face lots of problems. First is ignorance. No, we don't have any discrimination and racism here. We are pretty good. We are very inclusive and welcoming. Look, we have a big welcoming sign here. And that's the challenge. So when our municipal government or our council says that, when our community says that, we really don't know that, yes, there is still a lot of work to do. And then I thought, okay, how we can overcome this situation? Being small and with limited resource and very direct relation with our community or council, we thought, okay, what other municipalities or small towns are doing? Are they facing the same problem, or there is some champions or doing great? And that's how we basically started our coalition. And I will talk about how we formed our coalition momentarily, but what I want to say first is, after forming this coalition, we feel so supported. We feel that we are a family of inclusion workers, professionals, and advocates. We know each other, and we support each other, and we suggest advice and collaborate each other how to make our rural communities better and better. So our focus is inclusion, and we collaborate with other municipalities in our region, non-profit organizations, community leaders. And so far, our, like in our title, we said it's rural South Central Alberta, but we are beyond that. We thought about like about our capacity, and we will do like Calgary and Bow River FCSS area, or Calgary and area Child and Family Service area. But we are going beyond that, and whoever wants like to be connected with us and share their knowledge, expertise, research, we most welcome them. And they're coming, and we are like so far we are doing lots of difference than before we had this coalition. Well, we do. So our cause is diversity and inclusion in the rural region. So what is it? What is diversity? What is inclusion? Yes, like of course when we are talking with our council or community member, we need to define it. But when we are talking with our members in the coalition, we know what is it. Diversity is the mix. It's not only the black and white. It's not only the immigrants or Canadians. It's not only the indigenous population here. It's beyond that. It's sex, it's low literacy, it's low income, it's ethnicity, it's language, it's culture, it's our celebrations. So all these things, our ability, if we put all this together, who is not different? Everyone in this room or in our community is different. I am 5'6", someone is 5'10", someone walks on wheelchairs or scratch. Someone has different hair than me. So we all are different, and our needs are different. And when we are talking about our rural settings, well, we don't have a public transport. How we can, if someone don't have a car, how we can go for our medical appointments, or how our kids will play together if they need to go for a specific field, so on. So what we do is we meet twice a year so that it's not too heavy for our members. We share our work and plan. Like last year, we had met twice. City of representative from city of Cochrane, Airdrie, they came and shared their knowledges, what they have done so far to improve the situation. They have done experiential activities with their councils, like one day out in our community on wheelchair, how that's feel. And that's how we build. Like we heard that knowledge, we appreciated their plan, and like kind of adapt in our community how we can do more. We share our success stories, experience, and of course our challenges. And we like in our coalition we have some experts from AUMA, from Human Rights Commissions and other organizations. So when we are discussing our challenges, of course there is some solutions too, and most often that's really cool ideas. And if we don't know, of course we ask for experts, suggestions and advice, and we know where to go. Like being alone and in a rural community, of course we are not connected with great resources around us. So we overcome that situation. And finally, like we offer develop like capacity building workshops for our community and our members. Like what are the welcoming communities? What are the characteristics? What is Islamophobia? What is human rights in small communities? Or what are the challenges? And where we can get more help? And simply, our mission is to make this platform for the professionals and advocates to share our skill, expertise, experience, to work together to make a welcoming and inclusive community in our region. So, to create a welcoming and inclusive community, there is no single prescribed formula that we can follow. its community is different, like us. Like every community is different. But there is some commonality, of course, that we can follow and we can try. And we share that kind of information and support each other. Like this work is very stressful. Like when you say, okay, we need to make more welcoming community, and your council is, oh, we have a big welcome sign, and that's it, like we are welcoming. So that kind of stress, we need to support each other. And I would say that's working very well so far. And to establish social justice, making our community a welcoming and inclusive one is a long way to go. And when Calgary or some other municipalities like this large are doing at this level, and we are just kind of define what is inclusion. So the work is different. Sorry, just got 5 minutes. Okay, so how did we form? As I was mentioning that a few years back, we had a regional coalition meeting, coalition forum, and that's how we formed. So we went through few experiential activities. We put dots on every of our participants and asked them, like color dots in different colors, and ask them, okay, let's do some cool things, and let's find our groups to do our activities. And say, what happens? Everyone is divided according to their color. Okay? Oh, no, we are not really focused on colors, but we do. And that's how we started. And our speakers explained how we can do more. Our best practice presentation from the region said, well, we are doing this, and we are the champions. And yes, they are the champions. Excellent result. And then we call for the coalition. Okay, let's work together. Let's support each other and make our community a better one. The upper one is the privileged work. And you know how privileged we are, we don't know until we really compare or we really experience that. So, like diversity, inclusion, or racism, whatever you say, like until we experience that, we don't know. And we need to know fast, experience that things fast before we start working on it. So this worked really well. Okay, so what is our expected result? Yes, the same things like we want to make our community according to our capacity and the characteristics of our community. We support each other and overcome our challenges. But like this is my favorite. This is what we expect. You might be familiar with this illustration or this photo. Like in the very first one, what is, yes, we have supported them equally. But is this making the right result or our expected result? No. What about the second one? Yes, that's great. Everyone is watching that game, and yeah, like that's our success. Yes, most of us really work like this, like in the second or middle picture. Yes, we support whatever they need, and so that they can really get that. Or is there any other opinion? Well, I put that in my Facebook, and like I got thousands of response saying that, oh, look at these guys, they are freeloader. Okay, yes. Yes. But think about our community. If our neighbor is not really getting that services or that basic needs are not met in their family, like, is I am rich and able to maintain, I am happy? No. So our focus is not to support accordingly, but to remove that systematic barriers that basically blocking these people to get that services and their rights. I say, oh, welcome. But I have this in front of me. I don't want you to hug me or come to me. So first we have to remove these barriers in order to be welcoming and inclusive. And that's it. Thank you.
I don't think you're
A
on.
little bit about the work that Brookfield, a global developer, and Vivo, a charity in North Central Calgary, are embarking on. We're at the start of our journey, but we wanted to kind of share three things. How we came together, some of the big work we're embarking on together, and some of the work that we're starting to land on the ground.
Tracy and I haven't really practiced this together, so bear with us. But essentially, Brookfield has been speaking with Vivo for probably the last 2 years. And we were looking at how could Brookfield work closer together with Vivo. We're now playing together. It's one of Vivo's words. They like to play. In the north, with one of our new communities that just came to be at almost exactly a year ago today in North Central Calgary. So that's where our partnership really started to come together, where we knew that Vivo was passionate about creating inclusivity and creating active, healthy lifestyles within their community. And we said, well, Brookfield is all about creating communities that have a high quality of life, and we want healthy and vibrant and thriving community that we're creating. And so essentially we saw some synergies. Was Vivo is about creating healthier generations, and what we're trying to achieve at Brookfield is creating the best places to call home for those people who choose to live in our communities. And just an aside, you guys are all in one of our communities. So Cranston is a Brookfield community, and the facility that you're in is a residents association facility, which is part of our instruments or our tools to help achieve overall better sense of belonging, higher quality of life. So that's how we kind of came together. Do you have anything?
Yeah, we dated for like a couple of years, getting to know each other's work and vision and mission and all the good things that were happening. And I think that there was two things that really stood out to us, or two baselines that we noticed happening from a national front that we were both working towards. Brookfield working on, they had done a baseline of their communities across Calgary, understanding that 26% of their communities felt connected. And they really thought that was an important stat that they wanted to shift over the next 5 years. And Vivo was, there's a D- for kids and families in terms of like physical activity. And we know that physical activity, there's pressures on that in terms of like, if you feel greater sense of belonging or happiness, are you able to participate maybe more and be more confident to try different activities out and be more active in your lifestyle? So those were kind of the baseline or benchmarks that we both talked in common about. And we really talked about the passion of wanting to do community-driven solutions together. So how could we lift and empower the community's voice in the design of new communities, and how could we use some of the information that we were learning together to be able to integrate into existing communities? And then taking that work and inviting others to play with us, and then to be able to share those results and learnings so everyone's taking them and using them in their own world, which in their own way, which means for them.
So the four kind of impacts that we were trying to achieve, so we formalized, first of all, we dated for a while. And then we were like, we need to formalize this relationship. And so we actually have, in true Brookfield fashion, a signed agreement of this is what we're going to try and achieve. And it wasn't something that we were going to try and pretend like we could do in 1 year. We actually committed to working together very closely for the next 5. And so some of the things that we're trying to achieve over those 5 years is we really wanted to enhance our model for community planning. And that was to try and achieve greater, I don't know, just greater elements to how we could fundamentally change the way the roads are put in, the parks are put in, where we would put a homeowners association facility or a residents association facility. How could we have greater collaboration with some of the community association within our communities, and how could we have just a better overall community experience? And a part of that enhanced model was also to really amp up how much we talk to our community. Right now, we have a lot of people who have stake in what we do, but we were really missing a voice at the table, and that was our community, our residents. And so how can we amplify the resident voice within our community model? Through Vivo and through their connection to this community, we really wanted to start to amplify and leverage the local, national, and global research that was at our fingertips, and what Vivo really brought to our attention, that there's a lot more that can contribute to how we enhance community than just our experience in the field. Multi-generational buyers is something that we are focusing on. From what Vivo's research has done, they look at all of their generations, the Gen H, the Generation Healthy. So they're not really looking at specificities of just families and youth. They're looking at the entire spectrum of generations. And we know, with all of the growing different segments within our world in Calgary and Alberta and North American-wide, is that we're seeing growth in different age groups within our communities. So we really wanted to start to champion solutions to provide them with all of the wonderful programs and solutions that we might entertain for a core group of people that we deliver to, which was families. And then system levels change. This was to try and navigate the world. So we know that sometimes developers have had bad rap. There's some narrative out there of what we're trying to achieve. And what we really wanted to show is that we wanted to change the narrative. We wanted to find more about how could we work with Vivo and others to show that we are all about trying to create communities that enhance the quality of life and the sense of belonging for its residents. So how could we do that better together, working with those at Vivo, but also helping us navigate new pathways, new narratives with our city administration and with other stakeholders at the table.
And I think to be able to do this, we kind of had to embrace some new roles, because when we embarked on the relationship, we were like, okay, so what does this mean? How are we going to leverage the work that we're both doing? How can we capitalize or optimize resources we both have? And how maybe we take on different roles because you've got a charity and a developer working together. And really from Vivo's side, it was how can we help generate evidence? We have a relationship with the universities of Mount Royal and University of Calgary in terms of being able to support some of the work that we wanted to do. And how do you design an intentionally new community from the start with its actual residents, and then measure that difference over time in terms of some of their activity levels or health behaviors, and or do they feel a sense of belonging? But they get to actually design what that community looks like over time in terms of that sense of belonging. And how would we be able to tackle that? Another role that Vivo took on to support Brookfield was a convener. So how could we bring more of the community together? So a lot of the bulk of the work is starting in North Central Calgary, but how could we bring different players to the table? Like Northern Hills Community Association, how could we learn from them in terms of the work that they're doing to be able to put in our work? How could we link with local community organizations and businesses to see how we could all work better together in terms of reinforcing the community's day through a 24-hour period? And that is sort of the larger work that we're embarking on. And Brookfield, again, taking on the role of, they have living labs in the heart of every corner of the city. And they have people moving there every day of all generations, and being able to work with those communities to be able to influence the change, but have the community's voice be the change, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that have to make the difference in the lifestyle, and they'll affect things, and that's what we were really passionate about doing.
Yeah, so we are just embarking on our journey, our 5-year kind of plan, and so I guess maybe I'll just highlight one of our immediate projects, and so you get an idea of an example of some of the things that we're working on. So we have the community that we're speaking of in North Calgary. It's named as Livingston. And one of the things we're looking at there is we literally have a group of about 150 families who have moved into the community. And so what we've kind of asked them to help us with is something we're calling the Livingston Legacy Project, where we're going to have some qualitative conversations with some of these families to talk about their current lived experience within the community. And when I say community, I mean, for those who maybe have moved into a more suburban environment, it's literally a street with maybe 100 homes around it. Right now, it doesn't feel like a community. It has a long build out. There's 15 to 20 years before, all of the services and all the amenities will be there. So what are their current feelings? Why did they move there? What's their vision? And to get an understanding of how are they feeling about their sense of belonging? How are they feeling about quality of life? And we want to monitor that over the next 5 years. So we would connect with them at year 3 and again at year 5. And hopefully they'll see kind of that evolution of community. But really what we want to understand is how does that impact their day-to-day? And then the second thing that we're looking at is actually hooking them up with some technology and having them tell us what their current baseline activity levels are. And so through the use of wearable technology, or I never say this word right, it's like
Accelerometry.
Really, from ages 5 and up, what does that look like? So just looking at their baseline, establishing what is their current activity levels, and then as the community evolves, as it grows, as different amenities, so parks, our homeowners association facility, and maybe the first shops and services arrive within that community, what does that do to that, the physicalness of their life on a day-to-day basis as well? So that's just launched, it's just kicked off. And then the other one that's going to come up in the spring is what we're going to be doing is systematic observation in some of our open spaces, our park spaces. So through the work with Mount Royal University, just taking a look at our green spaces and understanding the level of activity in them, what people are loving, whether they're coming there for active play, or even if they're coming to read a book or be more peaceful or relaxed. So working with them, and what that's going to help us hopefully deliver is just a better network of open spaces that can appeal to that multi-generational group, and understand how we can learn from that to create better open spaces going forward.
And I think the other piece that we have just starting in April is how are we going to co-create with the community? Because there's some spaces coming online for Brookfield in terms of some outdoor and a homeowners association. And how can the community co-create what that looks like? So what inspires them? How will they bring the activities that happen there to life themselves? What do they value as important? And how does that have to change over their lifespan? And really getting them to say, and how do they want to be a part of actually maybe delivering some of those programs? And again, it's community sharing with community, so really going to that next evolution. And then the other initiative that we're starting on, this is a North Calgary initiative, is how do we work with our local aldermen? How do we work with the local businesses, local community organizations? How do we bring everyone together and say, what does a plan look like together over a longer period of time? How can we all work and reinforce the work that we're doing and link it and collaborate? And that is something that we're passionate about being a part of as we go forwards, is being able to make some of that systems change and getting the support to enhance some processes and systems that are in place that we can't give the empowerment to our communities to be innovative for what they want in their life. So that is a longer term piece, but we're getting started on it with our local aldermen in the next 2 months.
So we look forward to your questions.
Just finished.
You can take that mic with you.
Oh, okay.
This one though, let go of it.
Okay.
Look, there's like a fight for the mic. Well, that was amazing, and I live here in Calgary, so the fact that it's a collaboration like this is happening warms the cuckles, is that a word, of my heart and my soul. Okay, so we are going to throw it out to you guys. I have a mic. Does anyone, oh, Lisa has a mic too. All right, anyone have a question for our panel?
I think that's a really important question. I think language is so crucial to this work, and I don't mean familiarizing yourself with Indigenous language, but I think the everyday English language that we use. So for instance, when I talk about this context setting information that I present and design for my team at the Calgary Foundation and other stakeholders in the charitable sector, I'm referring to this history as a shared history. I think oftentimes when we think of residential schools, 60 Scoop, all that kind of stuff, we look at it as Indigenous history. It's not Indigenous history. It's not just my history. It's my history plus it's your history. So it's a shared history. I think when it comes to specific words like Aboriginal, Indigenous, I use both interchangeably. I think from a legal perspective, when we refer to First Nations communities, they're often referred to as Aboriginal. I think from a legal standpoint, it encompasses First Nations, Métis, Inuit people from a legal government perspective. So it's even further important to enter into that context setting so you understand how that impacts an identity, a group of people. Like the Indian Act of 1876 is exactly like the Indian Act of 2018, which talks about Aboriginal and uses that word to encompass. I think in the movement of reconciliation, what the First Nations people and community is doing is using the word Indigenous. But I think ultimately, we would just like to be referred to from where we come from. I'm Blackfoot. I'm a Blackfoot speaking person. There's diversity within the Indigenous community, so Blackfoot perspectives are going to be different from Stoney and Nakota perspectives, or different from Tsuut'ina perspectives, all that kind of stuff. So we can't be blanketed. I think we are trying to be blanketed with terms like Indigenous and Aboriginal, where in fact we have our own identities and customs, and there's diversity, there's uniqueness, and there's beauty in all of that, those teachings. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, we like our rules and our boxes and things. With space, we bought the stuff and then we worked out the space. So it's kind of like do and then apologize later. We have a toy library at Lethbridge Public Library, so we do have a dedicated space for these weird items. And I think because we decided to market this collection as a pilot, let's see how this works. And because of the success of that, then the powers that be kind of opened up the wallet strings and said, you know what, we will build you a shelf. So that's how we did it. With the bits, it depends on your librarians, right? If they are cut and dried and, oh my gosh, we are going to count every little piece, there's that. Well, then you do it. This is what the community wants, and we will give you what you want. The other thing is that sometimes kits come back with missing pieces. And so our process is that we mark it in the record. Okay, this farm kit now only has 6 animals instead of 7. Okay, fine, but you can still use it, right? Versus a puzzle, if you're missing a piece, well, that's a learning experience to just deal with disappointment, But so if you have a collection librarian, they make the judgment whether the kit is usable with or without the pieces.
Okay, my pitch for the rubber chickens is that if you bring a football into an active living program or to some sort of after-school program, for example, you're cutting out half to 3/4 of your group if they've never touched a football before. The intimidation factor is huge. And then if you're dealing with individuals with fine or gross motor skill concerns, issues, or barriers, another factor. But you bring a rubber chicken into it, there ain't no rules. You can grab that chicken by the neck, you can grab it by the leg, you can grab it by the guts, and you chuck it. And it's fun. And even for myself, working and living with kids with disabilities, rubber chicken, suddenly that kid's chucking that chicken better than any football. But if you brought that football to them first, they'd shut down. No way. So that's why you do rubber chickens.
Hello, my name is Vince. I'm a landscape architecture student at the U of C and also an AHCA board member. So my question is for Tim as well, and he talked about incorporating reconciliation into a healing culture in everyday life. And from my design background, I'm thinking, how do we set the environments for that? What would it look like if we designed our lived-in spaces to be more conducive to that culture and that healing and that spirit of healing? Because in a lot of cases, we're very siloed physically. So I'm just wondering, is there a way for us to design our communities to be more built around that healing culture?
Yes, I love that question, especially because Brookfield is here as well. I think in any kind of effort to build inclusive spaces specifically for Indigenous populations, if you think about it, there are over 600 places of worship in Calgary. Not one of those is dedicated for Indigenous populations, and it's interesting because we are the original inhabitants of this land, and when I incorporate trainings that I do, I always ask the question when I go to spaces: am I able to smudge? Am I able to light medicine? And then people kind of wonder about that, and they're like, well, I don't know. They don't know what that means. They don't know about the strong connection to spirituality that Indigenous people have to the land. They don't know about the strong connection that Indigenous people have to spirituality and all that kind of stuff. And that's a value, that's a practice that was at one point banned. We were put in jail. We faced significant consequences just by practicing our everyday of life. So you have to embark in that context setting first, that phase first. You have to understand the importance of this disruption of history, this disruption of culture, before you can begin to expand. And then I would say the next step is to expand your network to people who have that knowledge, like traditional people, knowledge keepers, and really kind of learn about wise ways of practice. I think also reaching out to spaces that have been developed, like the Netsitapi Learning Center for the Calgary Board of Education redesigned a school in Dover that incorporates accessibility to smudge, all that kind of stuff. But I think if you really learn about circles as restorative practice, learn about Indigenous people's connection to the land, Blackfoot territory, what does that mean? I think if you start educating yourself, I always say don't let schooling interfere with your education, because you have to reach outside of those educational walls to connect to community members to this knowledge about the significance of spaces like that. And I think there are steps. There's cultural awareness, there's cultural competency, there's cultural sensitivity. I think to become an accomplice, allies are needed in this work, but to actually do something suggests action, and accomplice suggests action. And that's creating those safe, anti-oppressive, culturally safe spaces. So I really appreciate that question. Thank you for asking that.
And do you have any ideas in terms of creating that inclusive space? And I'm not saying that necessarily in an Indigenous context, but what are you actually doing to create that inclusive space?
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Tim?
I've done many things at Brookfield, but actually the design of our communities is something I've just recently been more involved in, and trying to understand the personal experience with our spaces and how we can make it better. And I would say right now, where Brookfield's trying to navigate this space is that we have seen more and more diversity of all different ethnicities within our space and all different cultures. And so really for us, it's context setting. So we're doing a lot more research into the needs and the social values of all different segments of people, and really trying to understand how in a community, I'll use Livingston as an example because it's one of our largest, it's going to span over 1,200 acres. There's going to be, I don't know the exact number, but like let's say there's 100 acres of open space. And so how can we do a better job of designing, intentionally designing those spaces to be connected, but also offer something different? It's like pick your own adventure within the community, and depending on what your needs are or what you want out of those open spaces, how can we plan them to be more engaging and be more purposeful. So not every space has to be kind of vanilla and appease, and to have like the tree and the tot lot and that shrub. How can we make it so that it's every single space offers a different experience, and maybe for a different population? And so that's where we're at right now. It's more about getting that baseline understanding and then designing more intentionally throughout a community. There's a lot of people who are stakeholders within the design of a community. And so I would say, how do you design life into a space is the question. It's through engaging your stakeholders, and it's through understanding those needs and understanding that there's policies in place through people much smarter than I at an engineering and a planning and an urban design level, but then it's just navigating that space. But ultimately, my passion is understanding the needs, understanding what someone, when you say like designing life into that community, what is the life that they envision? How do you pull that from your community and really understand what they're wanting? And then how do you use that to kind of circle back with those experts at the top and understand how you can do that with more innovation, more thoughtfulness, and really, really having that end user in mind, and understanding that life they want to live.
I just want to thank the panel for their amazing stories and contributions, because really it circles back to the keynote from Jim Dyer's last night about how important it is to just go out into your community and ask. And often the wisdom is in your community, the wisdom is in your group, the wisdom is in this group, whether which inner circle, outer circle that might be. And I think the key to these interesting and fascinating collaborations is that you just went and asked what can come of these thoughts and these collaborations. And I find when you ask these things, amazing things arise from it, and people always step up. So I think that is a great thought to end on.